Sirens, Slammers, and Service, a podcast for female first responders by female first responders. My name is Nikki Cluche, and I will be your host. As a former correctional officer in Alberta for almost 2 decades and the founder of Blue Line Fitness Testing, which provides law enforcement fitness testing and first responder wellness workshops, I started this podcast as a way for female first responders to share the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of their daily work. I want to showcase the unique perspectives, skill sets, and personalities that women bring to a first responder career and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go.
Welcome back, guys. This is Nikki. I'm here with the most amazing freaking female that I have met, honestly, out of all of my history in corrections. I am joined today by Dianne Beaton, who is the current director of the Edmonton Remand Centre, the first ever female director of the Edmonton Remand Centre. Dianne has over 35 years in corrections. She started in the centers, went out, lit it up in community corrections, and then came back to ERC to come back as the boss in 2020. I cannot wait for you guys to hear this today, to listen to this story. So welcome, Dianne. How are you?
Well, thank you very much, Nikki. Boy, if you could see me and make me blush a little bit there, but I'm doing very well, and I'm very excited to be here today. I've been listening to all your different guests, and I'm quite humbled to be on here with the many other female first responders that you've interviewed over time. It's pretty exciting.
Like I said before we started recording, I've been so excited about this one because I've known you for so long, but I never actually knew your full journey, your full story. I knew little bits and pieces when I met you in kind of different roles that you had, but I didn't actually know the full kind of journey or the full length of it. And even when we were talking and it was 35 years, I was like, holy shit, 35 years is a long time. It's a long time in corrections. It's a long time in general, but it's a long time in corrections. And to have done all the different roles you did and to be where you are now, leading the biggest jail in Canada, the most technologically advanced jail in Canada. It speaks volumes to your abilities, your skill set, your leadership, your style. I just think it's freaking awesome. And when I heard that you got the job as the director, I was I literally jumped up and down and I was like, fucking right. Yes. I can't think of a better fucking person to be in that job. So it's amazing. I love it. So tell me, how did it all start? How did 35 years of awesomeness start?
Well, it's kind of funny. I grew up in rural Saskatchewan, and I always, likely from mid-grade or that, I always wanted to be a police officer. And of course, we always had the RCMP in town. And so by the time I was in grade 12, I was doing a ride along with the RCMP, and I would go out with them to different calls and see how it worked. And back in the 80s, there was a lot of female troops that they were putting through and French troops. So I had a little bit of French, but in rural Saskatchewan, I wasn't using it. So my skill set was very poor. So my first year, I went to University of Regina and took some French classes and, your typical psychology, sociology and stuff. And I had applied for the RCMP by then, and I was on the waiting list. And I used to go down to depot and meet with this training staff sergeant. And he said to me one day, it's going to be another year before we put a female troop through again. Why don't you look at going to Lethbridge College to a law enforcement program there? All the instructors are ex-RCMP. It's a great program, etc. So I hadn't even heard of it, right? So I applied for it and I was accepted. And back then there was only 66 of us admitted into the course, and it was called law enforcement at the time. So anyways, I started the program, loved it. It was a fabulous program. And then about 3/4 of the way through our first year, we got a call, and there was only 12 females in the course, and we got a call for a troop date. And just about all of us, I think 8 of us were called for this troop, right? And so we all had been on the waiting list over 6 months. So we had to go do a fitness test and our physical and all of our testing again. And when I went to do my physical, I found out that I had a cornea that was breaking up. So I couldn't make the eye requirements anymore. And that meant any police force back in the 80s I couldn't do. So I had no idea what I was going to do then. So the instructor said, have you ever thought about a jail? And I was so naive back then that I didn't even know that there was jails other than the drunk tanks and the holding cells at the RCMP detachments. I said, oh, okay, let's look into this and that. So I applied for a summer position through the government of Alberta that summer. And I always say I should have learned then. I go out for this interview. It was 3 men on the panel. And all they did was holler at me and tell me that inmates would ask you out, and I was sure I wouldn't take a date and all this. And I'm like, God, no. And anyways, I get told I was successful and there was a position for me and I would be getting this offer letter, and that didn't get my offer letter, didn't get it. So I'm phoning head office and they said, no, we don't have a file on you. But I had an original letter from them. So I sent it in. And back in those days, you're faxing in and sending in and stuff, right? And old school, right? So then they said to me, you know what, Lethbridge already filled all their positions. We've got a spot in Calgary for you. Would you go to Calgary? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'll go to Calgary. And then they phoned me back about 2 days later and they said, sorry, Calgary's full. Will you go to Peace River? And I'm like, sure, I'll go to Peace River. I phoned my mom and dad in Saskatchewan and I said, hey, I finally got it all figured out. And I got a position in Peace River. My dad says, do you know where that is? And I'm like, well, just out of Edmonton, I think. He goes, go to the gas station, buy yourself a map and look it up, right? So I walk over to the gas. I don't even have so I walk over to the gas station, buy a map, come back, and I'm like, holy fuck, like this is 5 hours north of Edmonton. So anyways, I end up buying a car and going to Peace River. My dad had worked the rigs up there in the 60s. So they said, we'll come up, drive up with you. So I went up to Peace River and started as a summer student in Peace River in 1986 and worked there for the summer. There were 6 of us summer students. We lived in the houses. They had houses that had originally been the director's house and stuff on the jail property. So as summer students got to live there. So 2 of us per shift. We had the best summer ever. Like it was just crazy fun. And we had a riot in 1986 up in Peace River. There had been, right before we started, there'd been 2 very significant, terrible hostage takings. And then there was a riot in July of 86 up there, right? So it was quite the experience being up in Peace River that summer. A whole unit had got destroyed. Yeah, it was quite an incident on afternoon shift. I was on day shift, so I had actually missed the riot, but had been working that morning, could feel the tension and stuff, and then came back in the next day and had to take over working there and stuff, right? So I was very fortunate. I worked with a lot of really great senior staff up in Peace River, and they really took me in very well and did a lot of fabulous training that summer. Went back to college, finished off my second year, did a practicum at Drumheller, hated it. It was the most horrible experience ever. There was 3 or 4 of us females and 1 guy. And these instructors that we had at the time were like, well, if you don't go out for supper with us, we're not going to pass you on your practicum and stuff. And so I ended up writing it up, and like it was just a really bad experience and stuff, right? So then I'm kind of like, I'm not sure I want to do this job. But my next summer I got offered Lethbridge. So I worked in Lethbridge, had a fabulous summer again in Lethbridge, and kind of fell in love with corrections. And back in the 80s, it was very difficult. There was no full-time work hardly anywhere and stuff, right? So I decided to, I couldn't find full-time work. So I packed it in, went backpacking through Europe for about 3 months or so. When I got back, I interviewed in Regina, and they actually offered me a position that day in Regina. But they had a real gradual hiring system in Saskatchewan, and it was going to take me likely 5 years to get full-time. Like it was a real slow process in that. And they only have 3 or 4 jails at all. And then Alberta phoned and they had a position for me that I could go to Calgary as a casual. So I took that. Ended up being the Olympics when I was there. So I worked at Bow River Young Offender Centre until the Olympics were done. And I wasn't that crazy about young offenders because I'd already worked adult. It just was such a different abilities and what you did. I didn't know much about youth. I was only 21 myself at the time and stuff, right? So it wasn't really my thing. And then I really wanted to stay in Calgary, but there was no full-time work. So Peace River offered me work. So I packed up at April of 88 and moved back up to Peace River. And then, I get up to Peace River and 2 months later, Calgary phones and says, hey, we got work for you. And I'm like, I can't afford to move back down now. And that.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Missed the boat, Calgary. Missed the boat.
Yeah. So I ended up being up in Peace River until 94. I was very fortunate. I worked as a CO on the floor. Really enjoyed Peace River. It's a great old jail. If you've never been there, it's a wonderful place to go and visit and to work. It was great when I worked up there. And I was very fortunate. I got to do many different roles and stuff. I was a CO, then I did placement officer to cover off. I went into caseworking, and it was really funny at the time. They were really trying to convince me not to go the programs route into caseworking, because they're like, you could be a CO3 and that. And I'm like, nah, I want to learn more. I want to do programs.
Mhm.
So I went into programs in 1990, and then I was up there until 94, then transferred down to Fort Saskatchewan. Couldn't get a transfer as a CSW, so I ended up going as CO, back on the floor as a CO. And by this time, I was really involved in the union too. In the mid 90s, we had a lot of problems in Peace River in that they hadn't hired any full-time staff for so long that we had a tremendous amount of wages. And we had, remember one night we had a really, really bad slashing. A guy had, slashed his throat and his arms and stuff, right? And when actually wasn't on shift, but when they went to call the ambulance, the doctor came out in the ambulance, and then we didn't have full-time staff to go in the ambulance, right? So then they were going to Wildcat, and I was actually off on maternity leave at the time, and go out to the jail to meet with everybody and stuff, right? And that was at the time. Then the union took it to court, and we ended up with this agreement that was called the 410E agreement, which meant if you ever had a vacancy for 6 months or longer, and it wasn't somebody on maternity leave or sick leave, you had to fill it with a full-time. So I was able to be involved in some really interesting times.
I was just to say, that's a big win. Like, that's a big union win to have that written in and be like, this is now, like, it is gospel. Like, you will have to hire, right? Like, that's a big thing.
It changed a lot of stuff back then for hiring full-time employees and that, right? And in a jail, it makes such a difference where you can work, if you're a wage or you're full-time. If you can do outside escorts, there's so many things that, get affected by your level of training and your status, right? So yeah, it was a really big win. But when you talk about stories, I remember we had all these concerns going on in Peace River. And so we were going to have a meeting with the executive director of corrections at the time. So we came down to Edmonton, and I'm in this meeting, and I'm the only female. Everybody else is, guys from the union, and they're all male. And we're in this meeting, and I'd never met the executive director before, and he was a big man and stuff, right? And he only would kind of talk to me and everything. And, he's hollering and, just the old style of the way they addressed everything. And by the time I was done, we were done the meeting, we hadn't gained very much at all. And he comes up to me and he said, hey, don't take it personal. This is just the way it is. And stuff, right? We both have to fight for our sides. And I remember like whipping to the bathroom and just sitting on the floor and crying, right? And I was like, oh, this is too much, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that builds the character over the years, or the ability to deal with in a very strong male dominant industry and stuff, right? And I always say it's okay to cry too, right?
Yeah, it is. It's just, you try not to do it in front of people. You try and like sit there and take it and like bite your tongue as hard as you can and like bite your lip or cheek so you don't look like you're crying. And then you leave, and then you go to the bathroom and you break down, and then you pull your shit together, and then you come back out like nothing went wrong. You're like, totally fine. It's true.
It is so true, right? So we were very fortunate. The union took all that to court, and they, represented corrections really well, and they were able to get that agreement in place. Then afterwards, I transferred down to Fort Saskatchewan. Again, I worked as a correctional officer, and then I moved into the casework stream again. Had gone through a divorce by this time. My kids were just starting school, and my oldest was starting school, and I was like, oh, I really kind of need day job. Because actually, I had to, because working shift work, I couldn't find childcare for days, afternoons, and nights, and stat holidays and weekends and stuff. So I actually had to go to a live-in nanny, and I had a live-in nanny for 3 years that lived with us. And I always say, I'm sure, she saved my life and helped me to continue with my career then, because I was able to keep working and keep working shifts. And I never wanted special favors where I'd go straight on days just because of my circumstances. So anyways, we made that work, the girls and I. And then I really wanted straight days. So I started applying to probation. And it was so funny. I applied to every post, like every rural community, because I thought nobody's going rural. I'll get a rural posting or that. And they'd say, well, you're the same classification and you have experience, but you've never been a probation officer, so we're not going to move you out. And I just thought that was so unfair, right? You're the same classification, you've got the education, you got the background and stuff, right? So I kept, working on it and stuff. And in 1997, there was a change to the criminal code. And they created conditional sentence orders. So in 99, they moved some caseworkers from the jail out to community. So I applied at that time and I was successful. And I remember going my first day, I was at Central Intake in Edmonton, at a caseload of 184. I had 5 high-profile offenders on my caseload that were Section 32, so meant, they had been publicized in the paper and all this stuff. 3 of them were in the process of being charged with new high-profile offenses, and I was like, how do these people keep up?
That's 184. That's insane.
It was crazy and stuff, right? You were just processing, really, right?
Yeah.
So then I continued on with my union and movement and involvement at that time. And we ended up organizing information pickets in 2000, maybe the beginning of 2001. It was February, so it might have been 2001. So anyways, we organized information pickets. And at that time, the government then decided to start up a committee to look at corrections as a whole. And that's where the blueprint for corrections ended up eventually coming out of. And then they granted probation 170 positions back then. Took quite a few years to get all those filled, but at least we had a commitment to fill positions and move more position numbers into community corrections, because probation officers were just, it was just so, just such heavy caseloads and just so much work and stuff, right? So then I was fortunate there. We were successful in gaining a whole bunch of positions and stuff there. I got to move out of it. Not a requested move, but I got to move out of it. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And, I always believe that, things happen for a reason. And I got moved to a different office, worked with a wonderful group of people. And, I've been very fortunate in my career to work with so many great people. And then eventually I thought I wasn't accomplishing anything more on my union extracurricular activities. And I thought, if I want to keep making changes, I've got to look at going into management, and which I'd always thought I would never do.
Yeah.
So that I ended up, becoming a supervisor and then moving into management. And then I was a director in community corrections, supervising at that time the Edmonton district. And the department came to me and said there'd been a workplace review completed at ERC. And they had the recommendations coming out, and would I be willing to go to ERC to help work with the recommendations? And at first I was like, hell no, I'm not going back to jail. Like, I'm so close to the end of my career here. I got a great job that I love. I'm never going to go back to the jails, and especially not ERC. There had been a Wildcat Strike. There had been lots of unrest since the new center had been built and opened and that. And I was like, I don't want to go there. And I thought about it over the weekend, came in on the Monday and asked if I could read the report. They said, yeah, it's locked down in the minister's office, but we'll get you a copy. But it's got to be secure reading and all this. Anyway, so I read the report and I'm like, frig, man. This is no different than anybody's work site, except for this place is so big, right?
Yeah.
It's the issues that everybody has and that. And,
totally.
And sure, I'll go, but I'll only go for 3 months. Well, that was nearly 4 years ago. So I came here and fell in love with the building and the people and really enjoyed it. So then there was a change of leadership, and they asked if I would cover until they ran a competition. And So then I stepped in to cover. And then when the competition came out, I decided to apply and I was successful. So I've been here as the director of the Remand Centre since February 2020. Yeah. So it's been kind of a crazy wild ride, but it's fun and it's crazy every day. And there's so many good things happen all the time. And we so seldom get good publicity. We always get all the negative. And everybody thinks that, we're just a bunch of knuckle draggers and we don't care and that. But there's wonderful, wonderful people that work in here and do really, really great work. It's been exciting to be part of that too.
That's so awesome. Like just hearing you talk about all the different like stages of like where you've been, like historical changes to criminal code and like when you said the blueprint for corrections, I remember studying that for my CO3 interview, having no freaking clue what it was just like, they're like, you need to study this. It's probably going to be on the interview. And I was like, okay, I'll study this blueprint for corrections. No idea that it came out of like all your guys' work and like information pickets and like, and I remember again, staff, because I started in 2002. I remember staff being like, no, we picketed like just 2 years ago or a year ago. And like, there was pictures and I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Like really interesting. Right. Like, so to hear that it's like, I'm like, oh my God, wow. And like, see, even like conditional sentence orders, like I remember because I was in university when that came in. And so like learning about that in university and learning like how that was going to change incarceration rates and things. I was like, oh, wow. Like this is so interesting. Right. Like, so it's so cool that you were like in it and I'm like learning about it.
That just goes to tell our age difference, Nikki. But been very fortunate over the years to learn and grow with the system, right? You can't get stuck in how it was, right? You've got to keep moving forward. And I think sometimes when people get turned off of corrections or become very negative in it, I think it's because they've got stuck in the system of where it was. Or when I talk about some of those things that, there was no full-time work and you had to move forward, or, they lost my application. Some of those things, you just got to laugh about it and move forward and keep fighting for it, and to make changes and stuff, because otherwise you can get really stuck in it.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, moving into management was to continue making changes. That's exactly what I thought too. I was like, I want to change these things and I cannot do it from the level that I'm at right now. I can go to the CO3 and I can tell the CO3 this is what we need to do. But like, it would be better if I was the CO3. So, okay, CO3. All right. Well, I can tell the ADD this, but it would be better if I was the AD. Okay. Well, I can tell the DDO. Well, I should be the DDO. Right. And I always thought, okay, like moving into director, that was kind of my trajectory. I was like, I want to go and be a director. But I also saw the level of stress that came with that position and like how it becomes so much more than just corrections, like just the jail. Because now you're also dealing with political influence, you're dealing with public influence, you're dealing with, like again, the viewpoint or the opinion that the public has about corrections and about jails and about correctional officers and like circumventing all of that in a very politically correct manner it's not my thing. I'm not good at that. I know my limitations. I am not good. I'd be like, yeah, that's what fucking happened. What do you want? You want us to do it different? No, it doesn't work that way, right? So I was like, I don't know if that's actually where I should be going because I cannot be PC enough to be in that high of a position, like at all, right? So
yeah, it takes some of that. And you know what? I'm really, really fortunate here. I just got to brag about the team, but the senior management team here is really, really great. And I'm very, very fortunate to work with the individuals that I do get to work with. Their knowledge base is extensive. We're really lucky that we can all have different input and different ideas. And yet we can come to a general consensus and agree on something. I look at things differently than they did. Most of them have worked in corrections their whole career. I worked in corrections, but I also have that community corrections back. Had a little bit different ideas for programming, quote unquote, trust of the inmates, right? Because I dealt with 99% of these individuals in the community, and they're out there reporting into probation and living in the community. And I'm like, but no, we can do this. There's probation officers supervising these guys in the community, right? And that, right? So I do have a bit different perspective on things. I'm a strong advocate. I believe that, we need mental health supports in our communities. I believe that we need more programming. We need to support people. There's a lot of individuals out there and that we deal with on a regular basis that really they're in custody because of mental health concerns. And I'm not a strong supporter of that, right? I believe there's other ways that we should be dealing with individuals that are struggling with trauma or mental health. I do look at things a little bit differently, try and support the system the best that I can to keep it moving forward, right? Because I think we are in times of change and that we're seeing different ways of doing business too, right? And that's always exciting because we have a job to do. We have to make sure our staff are safe at all times, and that's not always easy because these are difficult buildings. So that's our number one priority is making sure our staff is safe and making sure the inmates are safe, whether it be from other inmates or excessive use of force on our staff behalf. So we do a really, really good job with that, and our staff are so well trained and so diligent on how they do their jobs that it makes it fairly easy, in regards to that. Yeah, there's always lots of challenges, and the HR perspective that you have to do once you get up to this level is also very interesting, right? Like if I was missing anything, it would be working frontline with the actual, whether in community corrections, it was the client base or the offenders in custody. And that I do really like working with offenders. I get out on the floor as much as I can. It's not as often as I would like, but I do get out on the floor, and sometimes that's the best interaction is dealing with the inmates and supporting the staff out there, trying to run the units and making sure we have the proper supplies and making sure that we just have the routines down and that every shift is working together. And there's so many factors that go into running a 24/7 operation. So we're really lucky that our whole management team works well together, and they're so knowledgeable and stuff that it helps make my job easier too. Right?
Yeah, well, and like you said, like that was what I missed when I moved into management, was that you're away from the floors and you don't, like big of a center as Edmonton Remand Centre is, the amount of administration that has to go on to ensure due process has been done and ensure that, everything has been documented and that the follow-up is taking place, that, these two inmates that were involved in a physical altercation are now, separation orders are going on, and now this has been updated and this has been updated, and there has to be, reports and discipline reports, and and that's one incident, and we have like 8 to 10 to 12 to 16 to 20 a day over a 24-hour period, right? That you're having to deal with, and then it's all coming to you to be like vetted and looked through, right? Like I remember as the DEO, like the packages we would put together would be hundreds of pages thick, and you're like, good luck with this on a Monday morning. We would put it in the basket and be like, see you later, I'm going on my 3 days off, I'll see you in 3, right?
Yeah, we see lots of interesting reports, and sometimes I'm like, you couldn't even make this shit up. Like, how does this happen, right? And that, but sometimes we're dealing with people that might be mental health, or they're coming off some kind of addiction and stuff, right? And they're just not in their normal state, and people do awful bizarre things then, right? Our staff see a lot, and when we read the reports on a Monday, like you say, sometimes it's like, what? This happened, right?
You feel like that when you're writing it. You're like, never in my life what I thought I would be writing through fecal matter at, like you're just like, here I am. This is my life. This is the life I live right now.
Yeah. It's like sometimes, how did I get in this, right? But I think anybody in these jobs, I always tell people that you have to really like people. Mm-hmm. And you have to like people in all different kinds of states and that, right? And you have to learn to not take things personally, right? Because there's all kinds of stuff that happens, and I have to deal with it as the director. And I just always remind myself that it's nothing really personal, and got to work hard not to take it as that. In the end, you got to remember, if you didn't like people a lot, these jobs would be even that much more difficult, right? Like I really like to hear people's stories, and I like to learn where they came from and why they're here. And even if they don't want to be here, why is it, and where are you going, and stuff, right? And that might even be the inmates, and can we help make a difference so that maybe you come in, on a regular basis, but next time you won't come in for 9 months. Well, that's huge savings. If we can help somebody with rehabilitation of any form, and they're not using the ambulances, they're not going to emerge, they're not, coming into custody or being investigated by the police, there's huge savings in our community, let alone their lives are way better. If we can always try and stay focused on that too, right? Because some days it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, right? To stay focused on that. But yeah, so I've been pretty fortunate, right? And I haven't been scared to try things, right? Like I'm like, well, I'll apply, and if I don't get it, I don't get it. Like that's okay. There's been many jobs I've applied for in my career too that I didn't get, and you seek out feedback, and next time you might be successful in that. And I was telling you earlier that it's so still to this day. I was somewhere here recently, and I'd often just say, oh, I work for the government. Oh, what do you do? I work at the remand. And it takes a bit to get out that I'm the director sometimes, right? And then this individual said to me, what? You're the director? You're a female? And I'm like, yeah. And it's 2023, right? And I bet you 90% of the inmates, when they write me their request forms, they put dear sir or sir and stuff, right? And then when they see me on the floor, they're like, kind of like, what? You're the director and you're a female, right? It is, it's always fun with that. And it's a great thing. I think it brings a different perspective. I'm not scared. Like I said before, I think crying's okay. And not that I ever cry around and stuff, but I do think it's okay to show that you care about stuff and you have empathy for people. And even if you have to discipline somebody, it's okay to be empathetic and to be compassionate about giving out that discipline. And I think in years past, corrections was such a male driven kind of hard, cold system that nobody ever wanted to show that side of them, right? So I think there are some benefits to having the female perspective around, and the ability to show some caring and kindness. And I work with lots and lots of men that are very kind and caring too, and just getting them to show that.
It's totally true. Like, and even under the leadership that was before you, it was shunned to have any empathy or any compassion or any, I would be told regularly in meetings when I would get heated up about something or get passionate about something and be like, but we need to do this, you guys, because it's the best for the staff, or it's the best for the inmates, or this is what is best practice. Like, and I don't give a shit if we've done it this way for the last 30 fucking years. We have a brand new jail. We can do all these cool new things. Like, please, can we just fucking try something? Oh, Nikki, you're just getting too emotional. You're just too emotional, Nikki. You need to just tone it down. And it would just send me into even more of a rage. Just like telling a woman to calm down. Tell a woman to calm down. See how that fucking works out for you, bud. It doesn't work well.
It doesn't work at all.
But and it would make me so mad, because I was like, I don't understand why having emotions and being passionate about something is being squashed. Like, we should be fostering that in our leadership. We should be fostering that and trying to draw that out from our leaders to get all these different skill sets, to get all these different perspectives, because just because we've always done it one way doesn't mean that that's the best way. There is other ways. And I love hearing that you're bringing in that kind of like new programming and stuff. And because when I was on the ERC, the new ERC, the NERC team, we used to call it, that was like, there was so much potential for the jail that we saw. And like, when we went down to Colorado and we trained with all these other officers from all these other jails in the States, and you start hearing what they're doing and the programs they're running, and, like, inmates were driving, like in Colorado, when we came out of the institute, like the training academy, they would take us to this mall, like across the way for lunch or whatever. And inmates would drive us. Like, we would get in the van with an inmate and he would drive us. And I remember the first time, like, I was with my partner and we looked at each other, we're like, I'm not getting this fucking van. Are you getting in the van? I'm not getting in the van. Right. And it was like, and then, but everyone, all the American like COs were just like, yeah, like, don't you have this? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Absolutely not. And they were like, oh, it's just normal. And I was like, so like first ride, right? I'm like this, I'm like hand on the door handle, like I'm ready to bail if I need to. Like, and it was like 2 weeks of that. And the inmates, they just get in and they drive and they do their things. And I was like, oh, like there is potential for this. There is potential for new programming, for new things, for new ideas to think about incarcerated people in a different mentality or in a different mindset or with a different outcome, like you're saying, of, well, even if they don't come, if they come, they're going to come back, pretty much going to come back. We're pretty much sure for some of these guys, but this time they're coming back for 6 months instead of 9 months. Well, that's a win, right? That's a win for everybody. So I love that you're bringing that in, and that the senior leadership team, which I will 100% agree with you, is absolute dreams. All of those staff, absolute dreams to work with. Like a couple of them were my mentors growing up through my career, that I would not have gotten to where I was without their advice, without their, shoulder to cry on at some point, without their, I need to come in here and lose my ever loving shit in your office and scream and rant and rave, and then I'll be fine, and then I need to leave, right? Like, so yeah, like, I mean, it's a great team there. It really is. And that they're on board and willing to try new things is so awesome to hear, because that's the only way that we move forward, right? That's the only way that we get better.
Well, absolutely. And I think we're in times in, just society in general. I mean, and we go through ebbs and flows, right? Where you hear you got to get tougher on crime and all that. And, then the next time, we're looking at more programming and that, and you've got to be flexible and work with that. But in the meantime, you got to be thinking, even if you're tougher on crime, every individual is getting out one day. So how do we make it that they're going to be better when they go back out into society, right? Because they're going to have to deal with, the grocery store clerk. They're going to have to go to, work with government workers on whatever support levels that they're getting or that, right? So how do we assist that so that when these individuals do go back out, so that they aren't causing any more harm or that within the community or to themselves or their families. We can be tough on crime and stuff, but in the end, what is it that we're doing? Doesn't matter if we're in the ebbs and flows of programming and support, or if we're in tough on crime, we've got to learn to work with that all the time. And I always say, we got to keep moving forward. And when you look at something like this remand center, when it was built, and all of you that got to work on that and go look at other jails across North America, just how things have evolved in, even the 35 years that I've been in corrections and stuff, just the changes that we see and the move forward, and that it's ever evolving, right? So to be part of that and to keep it moving forward has been a fun career and really interesting. So I've been really fortunate with that too.
It is. It's so cool. Like, and like, again, because like on that team, when you talk about, the level of knowledge and stuff you have in your senior management team, we essentially lost all of that. Basically, as soon as we opened, within the first 6 months to a year, all of the senior leadership was gone. And it was like, holy fuck, like, and so, people looking at me like, well, you opened this jail, don't you know everything? And I was like, no, I don't have 30 years in corrections. I don't know the answer. And like all the people that did are fucking living in Arizona and golfing. Like, I don't know what the fuck to do. Like, right? So to have that, like, that team, like that's with you and that just has that knowledge level. And I mean, I think we've done a lot better job of succession planning in the last little bit too, of filling spots and bringing people up. Before it was like, oh, hey, buddy's retiring. You get this job now, but you've never done it before and you have no freaking clue the level of work or what's going on right now. Like, you're bringing management upstairs. They're going to work upstairs for a year and then they go back down, and like, filtering through and having managers move between centers now, right? Like that to me, I always said, like, even though it goes against your comfort zone and this is my shift and these are my staff and this is my center, right? It's so smart to go work somewhere else and see that it's not all ERC, or it's not all the Fort, or it's not all EY, like that there's all these different things you can learn from people and skills and, even just different plant like bases, right? Like me going from ERC down to Red Deer, like I've said this before, I had to relearn a whole lot of shit that I forgot from old ERC because we didn't have 24/7 sentence admin on. We didn't have 24/7 nursing. We didn't have, even the front ladies, the ladies in the front that did all the HR and everything. I was like, I don't know the answer, and it's fucking 2 a.m. and I don't have anybody here. Like, oh my God, right? Like,
Yeah.
so to have to like relearn that stuff, like that keeps you fresh. It keeps you motivated. It keeps you like engaged in your job rather than, like you said, getting into that like really stuck in the process, getting negative, getting dragged down, starting to get burnt out. Like it's good to keep yourself fresh that way and keep that learning going. So it's so awesome to hear like all the changes. And like, again, I hear both sides, right? I get some staff that message me. They're like, this fucking bullshit. And then I get other staff like, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I hear that too, right? Often, right? And you can't make everybody happy.
No.
Ever. We know that, anytime, in roles or families or, our friendships, everything, right? We all have different opinions and stuff. And so what is it that you can do to support the largest majority, keep everybody as safe and moving forward as possible, right? And there's always people that aren't happy, and lots of people struggle with change. I shouldn't say lots of people. There's people that struggle with change. And so anytime you go to make something new or a change, there's always some pushback. But that kind of makes it fun dealing with it too, right? Because then you've got to be creative and you've got to think things and you've got to stop and relook. And I'm okay if I have to reverse something, like, you don't want to, because that's hard on your own ego and stuff too, right? But sometimes there's decisions made that you have to stop and rethink about too. And maybe things have changed in the last 6 months, and you're like, maybe this isn't really working like we thought it would be. That's okay, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, in a leadership role, I think you have to be willing to accept that. And sometimes that is very difficult, but I think it's really important to be able to do, and always keep that open perspective, looking at, what needs to be changed and what can we do to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Okay, because I don't want to take your time, because I know you are literally the busiest freaking person ever. I'm just gonna wrap up with a couple quick rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
So what is, because you're still on shift and you're still working all the time, what is your favorite food or snack while you are on shift?
I would say likely nuts. I always usually have some kind of nuts in my drawer, and then I feel like they're just a small little snack. I'm a salty person, not a sweet, so I get that little bit of salt, and it kind of brings me back sometimes when I need a stress break and a little, I call it a little anxiety dropper, right? I'll come and have a couple nuts. I would say that's likely my favorite.
That's awesome. I love it. Just a little stash in your drawer. That's
Yep,
hilarious.
yep.
I was going to ask you this before we started recording. Is the goose in the yard still? Is it still chasing people in the parking lot?
Well, we always laugh every spring that there's a couple geese that come and are sitting on all the vehicles and stuff. I haven't seen them yet this year, but they were here last year and the last few years. So I imagine they'll be back.
Well, there was one time we had to have like the lobby staff escort the nursing staff in because the geese were like attacking them. And I was like, again, it was one of those like random things that comes across your desk and you're like, is this for fucking real or is this a joke? Like, are you guys punking me? Like, I don't. And then I was like, no, seriously, like they can't get out of their car. And I was like, only in Canada would this be happening.
Absolutely, right? Oh, that's great. I haven't seen it to that extent. But, we will get pictures of geese these two sitting on people's vehicles and stuff, right? And out there, right? But yeah.
That's cool. Okay, second rapid fire question. What is one of the funniest things that's ever happened to you in your career? And that's a big one because there's a lot. You got to pick through a lot.
Oh, God. There's a lot of funny things over the years that have happened in both community and centers, but I think one of the funniest things that I remember, so I'd worked up in Peace River as a summer student, and then my second summer I was in Lethbridge, and back in the late 80s there, we had a lot of temporary absences, right, where the inmates would go out and work in the community in the daytime. And then we would go and pick them up at the end of the day and bring them back to the center, or we had bush camps and stuff. So anyways, I'd worked up in Peace River, and I was very fortunate as a summer student. They let me do lots and lots of the roles and stuff too. So we'd often have to drive the guys into town and then pick them up at the end of the day. And then I go to Lethbridge for my second summer, and the staff there were like, "Oh, you were trained in Peace River. You're fully trained and stuff, right?" They gave a lot of kudos to Peace River, and Peace River always was very, a lot of transition and lots of transient movement and stuff, right? And so they did do, and I think they still do a really good job of training their staff and that, right? So I'm in Lethbridge, and I was only there maybe a week or whatever, and I go to drive a load of inmates into town to drop them off for work, and they all decide they were going to give me a hard time, right? And just the typical, kind of rocking the van and kind of making all these comments and that. And all of a sudden I hear from the back, they're like, "Hey, I wouldn't fuck around. She worked in Peace River. She knows what she's doing." And everybody just shut up, right? And I remember thinking, who is this, right? And so anyways, when I go to let all the inmates out, I see this one guy there, and he had been doing time up in Peace River this summer before when I was there, and now he was down in Lethbridge, right? And I just remember thinking that was so funny that it was actually an inmate who set everybody else straight and let them know that I wasn't a brand new rookie. I always remember that one. I always thought that was somewhat.
That's awesome. I got that too when I was down in Red Deer. They'd be like, "Who's this new DDO?" And they're like, "Oh man, she came from ERC. Like, she doesn't fuck around. Like, don't fuck around with her." And then I'd laugh, right? Or I would use ERC as like a threat, right? When they were being dickheads, I'd be like, "All right, boys, will you be on the next transfer bus to ERC if you don't stop it?" And they'd be like, "Oh, Miss T, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." They were like on their best behavior the rest of the week, like golden, right?
Yeah, you could make that work an awful lot. Anyways, I always think that was a funny one, right? There's likely many other that I can't think of right now, but there's been many incidents over the years that have left us with lots of chuckles, right? The hard part is, though, sometimes we that work in corrections or first responders often understand it and get it, that it is funny, but sometimes our family members and the public don't see it as funny, right? Because they just don't understand that, I guess we call it black humor still, and stuff, right? But that darker humor and stuff, right? Just to kind of survive in these environments where you're dealing with just the untypical behavior of what you would see in, so many places, right?
Yeah, that's totally true. I was actually just talking about that with a friend this weekend, and we were saying, like when you're telling a story and then you look around and everyone has like a horrified expression on the face, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, you're not my work people. You're like normal people. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, never mind."
Yeah, well, shouldn't have told that story, right? But yeah, I think that's, some of the ones that I can think of over the years. Other people wouldn't really find that funny, right? But to those of us working in it, you see the humor in it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, one final one, because I know I'm over time for you. What is a piece of advice that you would give to somebody that is looking to get into a career, either into community corrections or into the centers?
Well, I think be open-minded. They're really good jobs. They are good jobs. And if you get into the role, either in probation or in the correctional centers, don't be scared to try different avenues, right? It's okay to venture out and to go into some of the other branches and learn information and why things happen. You've got to be curious on the why and figure out why things are happening and doing. And I think they're great careers. I've been very fortunate. I've had a really good career. I was a single mom for a few years, and I was able to take care of two kids, and they're both very successful and doing really well. And I attribute that to having a good job and being open-minded, and that I think came from part of that from my career too, right? So there's lots of really good things that come from it. You get to work with a lot of really great people who are really passionate. So I say it's worthwhile looking into it as a career, and many different options you can go into once you're here.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I try and like pass on to when people come to run the COPAT with me is, like, well, tell us about corrections, because I always give a little spiel before, like, this is who I am, this is where I came from, this is what I did. Well, I've heard so many bad things. And I'm like, Well, because of course you're only going to hear the bad things. You're not going to hear the good things, right? And then, oh, well, you're just going to be stuck on a unit with inmates. That's the only job you can do. And I'm like, no, let me tell you about all these other things. You can do this, you can do that, right? Like, so like you said, exploring it, knowing that, yes, working on a unit is one of the main jobs. It really is. It's one of them. It's what we staff mostly. You're going to do a lot of it in your career because that is being a correctional officer. But there is so many other little avenues that you can like you said, do a 2 month secondment here, or try a training thing here, or take
Yes.
this course, or shadow this person, right? Like there's so many other things that you can do. But you have to be open-minded. You really do. And you have to reach out and kind of extend out of your comfort zone, because it may mean, like you're saying, moving to somewhere. It may mean, taking a job that you didn't really want, but oh wow, it turned into something that is so much better and that you really like. And, so yeah, that open-mindedness and that willing to be like kind of courageous and try something new is huge. So
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Awesome. It has been a freaking dream talking to you. I have learned so much, like legitimately, like I'm trying to process all the things that you've talked about today. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so much knowledge out there. But I thank you so much again. From the bottom of my heart, I know how busy you are, and to squeeze an hour into your day to fit me in is absolutely an honor that you could do that. So thank you very much. Good luck. What's the plan? Are you going to stick around for a little while? Or you got retirement on the horizon, or?
Well, you know what? Likely in the future, I haven't decided that. I said I'm still really enjoying it every day, and I like coming to work, and I like the people I work with, and I feel like there's still some changes in that I want to work on. So I haven't put anything in stone yet and stuff. So I'll do a couple more years yet, I'm sure, right? I hear that lots of the floor staff will ask me that, but you know what? It's still really good right now. So I'm sticking with it.
I love it. That is fantastic. All right. Well, you go run that jail like the female boss that you are. And I will hopefully catch up with you again at some social function or somewhere. But take care of yourself. You're doing an amazing job. I'm so proud of you. I love that you have this job. Like, I love it. I literally silently cheer all the time when I think about you. So, way to go, girl.
Well, thank you very much, Nikki. It was lots of fun. And thanks for thinking of me and asking me to be on your podcast.
Yes. So welcome. Okay. Have a great one.
Yep. Take care.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening, giving me your time, your energy, and your attention. I completely appreciate it. Make sure you check out our next episode with another badass female first responder anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at bluelinefitnesstesting.com. I hope you stay safe, keep your head on a swivel, and watch your six.